legendary. I'm a little intimidated after reading his bio. He seems to have done everything. And Hawk, I don't know how you're going to contain this in the hour and a half because there's so much to talk about. I think this is really the teaser reel. And I hope that Mr. Fields can come back again to go over everything. I mean, just the books, his career, his teaching, Shakespeare, there's so much. Anyway, thank you for bringing him on board. Thank you, Bert, for coming, and we really look forward to this.
You're welcome.
I'm going to step right to the phone. So later down the line, if you need anything, Hawk, or if we've got questions, I'll let you know. But I'm going to close my camera for now and say, I'm so excited.
Well, thanks. First of all, I have to thank Jen Clymer, and I'm sure everybody who's watching knows what a job Jen does. So thank you. And Freda, thank you for the introduction. And as Freda said, Bert Fields is one of the nation's leading entertainment attorneys, representing a who's who of Hollywood. He has represented virtually every major Hollywood studio and talent agency and has tried many of the landmark cases in the entertainment and communications industries. He's a writer of fiction and nonfiction, law professor at Harvard. He's lectured on Shakespeare, but here's the big stuff. He loves karaoke. He's a musician. He's an actor. He's a race car driver, a boxer, and a man who loves all sorts of liquid libations. And he has just released his new book, summing up a professional memoir, which you don't have to be a lawyer to understand it, because I'm not, and I got it. It was amazing. So I'm honored he's with us today. Welcome, Bert Fields. Hi, Bert. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi.
Wait a minute. We're going to get him on here. Jen?
Yep, I've prompted you to start your video, so your technician can hit that button in the middle of your screen now.
Hit okay.
Got it?
There we go. Hi, Bert.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm okay. I'm a little hoarse today. A while ago, I had the COVID, and it carried over into kind of slowing my voice. They say it'll be over in a couple of weeks. So if you can't hear me, let me know.
We can hear you fine.
Good.
As I was saying in the introduction, aside from being this amazing lawyer, you're a man of many other talents as well, which we will get into. But let's start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up here in Los Angeles. I was born here. I was the only person born here that you know.
Me too. Me too.
You were?
Oh yeah.
What hospital?
And my mother was born in Boyle Heights.
Wow. Do you remember the hospital?
I was born at Cedars of Lebanon.
Ah, yeah.
And my mother
down on Franklin Avenue.
Right. Where were you born?
I was born in Queen of the Angels. I don't think Cedars existed at the time.
Wow. I think my mother was born at Good Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so growing up, where'd you go to high school?
I went to Uni High. I graduated there. I went to high school all over the country because my dad was in the Air Force. And it was during the war, so I traveled with him.
Wow.
And, mostly we were in Carlsbad, New Mexico. I played football there. Not very well, but well enough to make the team as a kind of substitute.
Wide receiver?
No, actually, crazily enough, I was a guard. The guy who played, I was strictly a second string. The guy who played ahead of me weighed 220 pounds. I weighed 120. So there's a slight disparity between the two of us. And in skill, there was an even greater disparity. I was terrible, but I loved it.
Now, in high school, were you in the law club or anything? I mean, were you a debater?
No, we didn't have in Carlsbad a debating team. We had a football team and a boxing team. So I did those two things, which probably I was better at them.
Now, am I right? Did you go to Harvard or Stanford? I can't remember.
I went to UCLA undergrad. The war was over.
Go Bruins.
I stayed at home. I went to Harvard Law School.
Right. And when was it in high school or in college that law became what, that you knew that that's what you wanted to do?
Well, it was in college, the beginning of college. That's probably for me. No?
Go ahead.
Okay. I thought it might be my lunch reservation. My father was a surgeon, and I just thought I'd be a surgeon naturally because that's what my father was. When I got to college, I started thinking about it and I didn't really want to be a surgeon. And I took an aptitude test, and basically it said, if you become a surgeon, you will undoubtedly kill at least 100,000 people. But so you shouldn't do that. Why don't you be a lawyer? Because you score off the charts on that. So I took their advice, stopped medical stuff, and became a lawyer.
Wow. So now let me ask you, were you at UCLA for Don Muma or Ronnie Knox or the UCLA's 1954 championship team, actually? I was a Bruin fan.
I was a Bruin fan too. It's hard to do nowadays. But I'm still a little bit of a Bruin fan. No, I was earlier than that. I graduated in 1949.
So it's just before Don Muma, I think, was 1950.
Yeah.
Right. And I went to my first SC UCLA football game, and I don't know why, but at 5 years old, somebody was yelling Muma, and the other team, SC, was yelling hee haw, and I could say Muma better than hee haw, so I became a Bruin fan.
Yeah, I was a Bruin fan. I could barely say hee haw or meemaw at the time because I was probably drinking in the stands. But
all right, so now you go to Harvard Law School, which is you get out of Harvard during Harvard Law because of growing up in Los Angeles and going to UCLA. Was entertainment law something that you always knew you wanted to go, or were you looking at something else?
not at all. I didn't know what I wanted to do except I wanted to be a lawyer. I got my highest grades in real property, which is bizarre because I know nothing about real property. And sorry, I didn't really know what part of the law I'd go into. I didn't even know where I was going to go. I was fortunate enough to make the law review at Harvard. And so I really could pretty much call the job I would get, and was deciding between Washington and Los Angeles, and decided on Los Angeles and went with a firm, general firm, had no idea about entertainment, didn't really know anybody in entertainment. As I say, my father was a surgeon, my mother was a ballet dancer. So I guess that's entertainment. So I got all kinds of cases. I would take anything. My first case was about a guy who had unwisely and allegedly touched the private parts of a vice squad officer in a Main Street movie. That's the kind of case I was thrilled to have.
Is that the Urinal Story?
That's the Urinal Story.
Can you tell a little bit deeper about that story?
Yeah, I could shorten it because it's a long story. My client was a resident of Beverly Hills who went for a drive, and the drive took him to Skid Row and into a Skid Row movie. You may ask why, and I don't really have a good answer for that. I didn't really have a good answer at the trial, except that he was just driving and saw a movie open and thought he'd go in and see a movie. In any event, after the first movie of two movies, a double feature, he went to the men's room. And in the men's room at the next urinal was a young man, a little older than he, bigger. And the man turned to him and said, "Hey, this show got you worked up?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I guess." He didn't know what to say, to be polite. And he then washed his hands and left. And about 5 minutes later, two guys came down the aisle and arrested him. They were plainclothes cops. And they said that he had touched the guy standing at the urinal next to him in his private parts. And my guy, of course, denied it. And in those days, I guess I didn't give a damn whether he was telling me the truth or not. So I thought I'd assume he was telling me the truth. And we went to trial and in downtown Los Angeles. And it was a jury trial. And cutting it short, I tried to make him angry. And I asked him a bunch of questions about, wasn't he demoted after this? Didn't he have a bad record? Really improper questions, some of them. And he got angry. And so when I said, well, didn't this guy barely touch you? Maybe for a second or two? He said, no, Mr. Fields, your client touched me for at least, I've forgotten the amount, but I think it was 30 seconds. Let's take that. It was a huge, crazy thing to say. So shortening it, I got up in final argument to the jury and stood in front of the jury. You know, there's a rail in front of the jury. So I said, this is an officer of the law. One stroke makes the offense. One stroke, one touching of his private parts, and he can arrest him. Now let's see what happens. If we take out 2 watches and go along with me, and I put my hand on the rail in front of the jury and started rubbing the rail. And I said, here's this officer of the law. He's rubbing my client right in his private parts. Now, that's 5 seconds. And he said it was 30 seconds. So what's he doing? The arrest is, he can arrest him right now. He's just standing there and he's still being stroked by my partner. I'm rubbing the rail back and forth. And we get to 10 seconds and the jury starts to titter and laugh. I said, come on, it's 15 seconds. It's half the time that he was being stroked by my client. And apparently he enjoyed it because he stayed for still another 15 seconds. So anyway, they took about 15 seconds to acquit him. And he was probably guilty as hell, but I didn't care.
Well, that's a great first case. I love it. Now, I don't know why. I understand that you broke into Edward G. Robinson's house, and I'm surprised you weren't disbarred for that. How did that come about?
Probably should have been. No. Eddie Robinson was a client of 2 older lawyers in 2 different firms. One mine and one Mitchell Silverberg. And Eddie was divorcing his wife, and he was accused of having another girl. In any event, he had the greatest art collection in the world. And he couldn't, in order to pay enough to make a settlement with his wife, he had to sell art. And Gladys Robinson wouldn't allow him to sell a thing. She said, it's community property, you can't sell it. So the 2 heads of our 2 law firms hit on the idea that in the middle of the night, if we could get Gladys out of the house, we would actually remove the paintings because Eddie was a co-owner and he could give us permission. And we would put them in the Los Angeles County Museum on display, announce it as the Robinson collection, and that she would then finally agree to take them out of the house. So at midnight, a very, very excellent young lawyer, then young, not now, and I took all the art, which was, I mean, it was incredible. There were like 4 or 5 paintings by every major modern artist you can imagine. And I mean, I can remember carrying out the bronze statue that's so famous of the girl in the ballet costume. And then, well, just about every major artist painting you can think of. I think there were 5 or 6 of almost all of them. And it took probably 3-4 hours to get everything out of the house. We got them all out of the house, took them in the museum, and sure as hell it worked. When Gladys saw the empty walls, she wept. She was miserable, and she finally went along. And that was it. They settled. And Eddie Robinson took me to dinner on the last night that he was in California. And he started talking about his wife. And he was a great actor. And he started to cry. And she was such a wonderful woman. And she was so beautiful, you can't imagine. And I looked at her, and you should feel sorry for her. You should feel everything. And I said, oh, it's so nice of you to say, Eddie. That's wonderful. And that was it. We left. And the next morning, he flew off to move in with his girlfriend in New York. And that was the end of the Eddie Robinson story.
Wow. Now, I'm just curious. I mean, these are,
Yeah.
multi-million-dollar paintings. Was there someone outside who was wrapping them beautifully so that they wouldn't
Yeah.
get scratched?
We had the crew from the museum,
Ah, got it. Okay.
LA County Museum. And I forgot this. The one thing that Mrs. Robinson insisted on when she said, finally, yes, you can sell the paintings, Eddie, they must not be in that museum. And she had them all removed, put in, I can't remember where she put them, but another museum.
She didn't like LACMA, huh?
Yeah, well,
Wasn't
not after that, not if they stole her paintings.
Yeah. Wow. Great story. Now, I know you're a musician, and evidently you and George Harrison had a kind of a fun time together with the Beatles and Mr. Harrison.
Well, one of the cases that I had that I loved was for the Beatles. And it was against a show called Beatlemania. We closed it up all over the world. And really, he and I became good friends, really. And he, I guess, we did sing together. At least he sang, and I kind of, you could hear that my voice goes very quickly.
I understand,
And,
but Bert, I mean, you sang with George Harrison. I mean,
no, he sang with me.
great. No matter what, to sing
Yeah.
with George Harrison.
Anyway, we won the case, and I got to sing with George Harrison.
Well, now I went to see Love I know you stopped the Beatlemania thing, but
Yeah.
I went to see Love in Vegas, and that had all the Beatles songs, but I'm assuming that the Beatles must have given the okay for that show in Vegas. Am I right?
Well, it depends on the time.
I
We
think
stopped.
it was in the 90s or the 2000s, early
Yeah.
2000s.
When we stopped Beatlemania, we stopped a bunch of others. But finally, the wives who were running the Beatles by then, because they were no longer making records, the wives said, oh, to hell with it. Let's stop. We were spending a fortune on legal fees, stopping all these people. What difference does it make? So we stopped.
Wow. I mean, singing with George Harrison, and then the next thing I read in your book is that you're acting with Jack Webb on Dragnet.
Oh, that was way before.
Well, but I'm saying
Jack was a client, and my son, I think, was 2 years old. And Jack said one day, I bet your kid would love to see you on television. I said, sure. He said, well, be on a Dragnet. I'll put you on. And he did. And it must have played 50 times. It's still on television. If you get a chance, you don't have to. But if you get a chance and you see Dragnet, my guess is that show will be one of the ones played.
So now, are you still getting residuals from SAG for that, like 20 cents?
No, I think it went 5 shows, and that was all I had in my contract.
Got it.
Which I stupidly made myself.
Well, now, yeah, but you were smart enough to help Jack with Jack Warner, a different Jack. Can you
That was a
that
whole
kind of
different
dilemma?
thing. Whole different thing. You want to hear about that?
Yeah, I wanted to hear
Well,
about that because
interesting.
a
Only
lot of people at the home, a lot of the residents, I'm sure, worked at Warner Brothers and probably worked under Jack Warner?
Well, I didn't always get along with Jack Warner, but I will say this. In the Webb case, he was a stand-up guy. Jack had been the head of television production at Warner Brothers. And they wanted to put, Jack Warner wanted to put in somebody else, I can't remember who. And his lawyer said, all you have to do is breach the contract. Jack is going to get another job immediately. That money will offset what you owe him. You won't have to pay him a dime. Because Jack Webb was never going to be able to convince anybody that he can't get a job. Well, Jack Warner said, well, do I have to breach the contract in order to do that? And they said, yeah, that's the law. If you breach the contract, he has to go see if he can find another job. He can, and that's it. We're out of there. We don't have to pay him a dime. Jack Warner said, Warner Brothers does not breach its contract. We will continue to pay him. He doesn't have to come in. We'll replace him. And in his other job, because he'll certainly get one, we'll pay him the full amount we owe him, which was nuts, according to his assistant. But it was such a stand-up thing. And I can remember his saying, Warner Brothers does not breach its contract. Something which I didn't always agree, but he did say.
Well, I can tell you that many years ago, I was on a film at Warner Brothers with Mike Nichols that we ended up not making, called Bogart Slept Here, with De Niro and Marsha Mason. And when Callie and Wells decided not to make the film after 7 days of shooting, it was a catastrophe. But I must say that both Callie and Wells were stand-up guys, didn't say you don't get paid, Hawk. And they went ahead and finished paying me for the movie that we never made. So
yeah, similar story.
Yeah. So that continued at least then. I can't talk about Steve Spira and what went on at Warner's later.
Well, Steve was a good guy, really.
Yeah.
I've had lots of fights with him, but he's still a good guy.
So tell me, I understand that your worst moment in working for a client was with a pretty famous Broadway producer, David Merrick. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. David was an incredible producer of serious drama, comedies on stage, I'm talking about. He could have 2 or 3 shows running at the same time on Broadway while he had 2 or 3 shows running, road companies playing all over the country. He was amazing. But he had the most ferocious temper of anybody I have ever seen. He was famous for this temper. And he excuse me, he had a little case out here that I tried, and really he had the much better case than our opponents, and our opponents knew it. They were going to lose, and I didn't even want to put him on the stand, but I thought I had to. The case was almost over. So I put David on the stand to testify, and he got up there, he sat there, he was fine. The other lawyer, very nice young lawyer, asked him, would you state your name, please? And David said, David Merrick. And the next question was, and what is your occupation, Mr. Merrick? And David turned bright red, stood up and said, off yours. I'm not going to take any more of this shit, and walked out of the courtroom.
Oh, God.
He was incensed that somebody would not know what he did. The peculiar thing was, because our case was so much better than theirs, and the judge was a sensible guy, he wasn't going to, I mean, I said, we'll bring him back tomorrow, and he feels so strongly about this. So that night, the other side said, we'll pay you. Just forget about attorney's fees and free us from attorney's fees. We'll pay you everything you say we owe. Great news. So I called David and said, great news. You know, they're going to pay us everything. He said, you see, Bert, I know how to treat these Hollywood types. When I walked out of that courtroom, He knew he was done.
oh
And he thought that until the day of his death, he thought he had won that case.
my God.
I think it helped him negotiate about the fee.
Wow. He probably used that on a lot of other
I'm sure he did.
people. Sure. Right. Now you started to make some money. You had a child, you had a wonderful wife, and you
Yeah.
decided to invest in Texas oil and gas. Because I know you did a lot of things right, but this one turned out not exactly right. And you,
Oh, it was so
with my
right.
old
It was
friend
right.
Wayne
It was
Rogers.
wonderfully right. It was marvelously right. Wayne Rogers was a brilliant guy, was not alive anymore.
Great.
Wayne was a good businessman, and he found some oil properties somewhere in, I think, in Oklahoma. And he came back and said, I think I can get us, with the emphasis on us, a piece of that oil field, maybe the whole thing, if we could just put up, let's say, 100,000 each. Well, that was big money for me in those days. And I said, okay, I'll raise my share. And we had Peter Falk, who was one, Jimmy Kahn was one, a bunch of us. And we invested. And lo and behold, we get a call from this guy, Tex. I should have been suspicious when he said his name was Tex. And Tex said, gentlemen, you have hit on what is probably the biggest find in the history of the United States. And he said, I could get you probably $20 million now for your share. But I strongly advise you not to, that's peanuts compared to what this monster field is worth that we have hit on. Well, Wayne, who was very conservative, said, let's take the 20 million. And Jimmy Kahn and I said, no, come on. If he says 20, it must be 50 or 100. Forget it. We're not taking 20 million bucks. And Wayne said, guys, you invested 100,000 and you're going to get 20 million. You're not taking it. But, oh no, we're in for more. So we got T-shirts with the name of our company on it. I've forgotten what it was. And we went on, and he kept saying the discoveries are great. It's fantastic what we're producing here. And then one day he said, I think we're going to shift from oil to natural gas. And I said, well, if you think it's better, okay. And my then wife, who died since, said, something doesn't smell right. I mean, shifting from oil to natural gas. I said, no. I mean, this guy knows what he's doing. I was so wrong. Anyway, it went on for a while, and we were richer and richer and richer. And then the letters started to come in saying, well, we've had trouble here. And if you put up a little more money, I think we can make this great elephant of an oil field the monster it should be. Well, then my wife really said, come on, you're getting conned. So Wayne went back to look at it. And Wayne called us sheepishly, because he was the guy that found it originally. He said, well, guys, I said, the wells aren't producing. I said, no, that's not it, Wayne said. There are no wells. What do you mean there are no wells? There are no wells. There is no property. This guy doesn't own dick. And he's got our 200,000. So we invited the guy, not telling him, to come. And we had a meeting in the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. Jimmy Kahn wanted it. We were on I think the 5th floor, wanted to hold him out the window until he gave us our money back. Jimmy, you can't do that. And we sprung it on the guy and told him, we'd been down there. We knew he'd been conning us. We were going to the police. He was looking at 20 years. And he said, gentlemen, you got me. I will pay you every dime. When? In the next 60 days. Let me go. So we let him go.
Uh-oh.
Well, the money never arrived, as you can imagine. And Wayne went down again. to Oklahoma. And it seems that the guy had gone to South America, taking his wife with him. And that was it. So it was a great lesson. I look back on it, and it must have been about 3 months when we thought we were hugely wealthy. And you know, it was worth it. For those 3 months, it was worth it.
Did you go out and buy a Rolls Royce or?
Well, we planned that kind of thing. I mean, we were talking about what kind of yacht. And should we get one together? And I said, no, why should we get one together? I'll get my yacht, you get your yacht. And that money is nothing compared.
Yeah.
That was
Who was it? Gordon Gekko. Greed is good.
great is good.
Yeah.
I certainly had greed.
Yeah. Well, now the next thing I read about is that you have a good luck charm that is actually green underwear.
Yes.
That's I don't know how often you wear it, but could you tell us why you wear green
Every
underwear?
day. Here, like,
That's okay. I don't need to see
you see?
it. There you go. Okay.
In
That's a first on this show for everybody who's watching.
in those days, I used to do divorces. I did a lot of them, and then I hated it, so I stopped. And I represented a wonderful lady called Vera Ruba Ralston. You may remember Vera.
I do. A friend of Sinatra's.
Yes, she had been the Olympic ice skating champion in the 4 years before. What's the name of the one who was so famous?
Sonia Henny.
Ice skating champion. Doesn't
Sonia
matter.
Henny.
Anyway, Vera was 4 years earlier. She was about 6 feet tall, very attractive and blonde, and she was married to Herb Yates, who, as you probably remember, owned Universal.
Right.
And when I say owned, he owned it. I mean, if he wanted to keep the sheriff off the property, he said, don't let him in. And Herb was about 5'7", and she was about 6 feet tall. And Herb was not that attractive, but he was brilliant. And he had started out as a newsboy, and then he was a boxer. And he finally, ultimately got Universal and was making the pictures, including with his wife. They'd been married for maybe 15 years. And he had come to the conclusion, totally wrong, that she was seeing another guy. She was not. She adored him. She probably didn't when she married him, but she had come to love him. He was bright and funny, unless you were on the other side of the contract, then he wasn't so funny. But she was just desolate. She wasn't having an affair with anybody else, and she just wanted to go back to Herb, and he would have none of it. So we had dinner together with my then wife, Lydia, and the three of us, and she was just not Lydia, but Mrs. I'm sorry, I'm still hoarse. Forgive me for
Don't
my
worry.
voice.
You have some water there, maybe.
I'll get some in a minute.
Okay.
Anyway, Lydia came up with a great idea that if you wear green underwear, you can't lose, you will get your wishes. So Vera, we've got to get you in green underwear for tonight, for tomorrow in court. And we were at the Bel Air Hotel. Somehow we raised some green dye and got a pair of her underwear, dyed it green. And we decided we'd dye our underwear green too.
Is this like the luck of the Irish? Is that why green?
Right.
Luck of the Irish?
Well, I don't know where Lydia got the idea. It was nuts. You know, she just wanted Vera to feel better, and she wanted to tell her nothing bad could happen to you. And so we dyed our underwear green, and we went into court, and Vera and I went in, were the earliest, and we're sitting at the right-hand counsel table, and in comes Herb Yates with a phalanx of lawyers. He must have had 5 lawyers, and they've got film, and they've got stuff, and they're ready for a knockdown, drag out trial of the century. So Hurt now comes walking down the aisle, and he looks at Vera, and Vera looks at her, and he stops and holds out his arms and says, Vera, I can't live without you. She says, hurry. And she jumps and goes into his arms in a movie clinch. I mean, it's just amazing. And we go into the judge's chambers, tell the judge that they're now they're reconciled and that they're now going on a trip. The judge was kind of a funny guy, said, they're going on a trip where? To Lourdes? And in any event, they got together and remained together for the rest of their lives. So Lydia and I, especially I, thought about green underwear, and I decided I was going to wear green underwear forever. And my instructions are I should be buried in my green underwear. It's worked so far. But
very good, Bert. Great story. I love it. We've never had anybody show us their green underwear. I think that's a first for.
Or any color underwear, probably.
Terrific. So now I was fortunate enough to know Annie Bancroft from, my dad made a movie with her called The Girl in Black Stockings with her and Mimi Van Doren in 1956 or 57. And then as I actually worked with Annie 20 years ago, just before she died. But I got to meet Mel. So when I read the story that you tell about the two of them at Pavillon, which for those of you who might not know is one of the great restaurants in New York for years and years, and you're their lawyer, but you're a young lawyer. You're not you don't have the kind of money that anybody can just go to Pavillon. So tell this story.
Right.
Great story.
Well, you set it up just fine. We come into Pavillon and they just go crazy because Annie had just won her second back-to-back Tony, and Mel was just on top of the world at that time. And they, Michelle Brooks, here's your table, and we have flowers and everything. And Mel ordered, must have been 7 courses. They were all spectacular. It was a wonderful meal. And Lydia and I are, the 2 biggest stars in the world, it seemed to us, and dear friends. And it was a thrilling evening. And it's all over. And the head waiter, who had been marvelous, was just rubbing his hands. You could see the kind of tip he thought he was going to get from Mel Brooks and Anne Bancroft and these 2 other people. And so he's standing there kind of rubbing his hands. He hands the check to Mel. And Mel says,
that left you off the hook, though, that Mel picked up.
Yeah, well, there was no question of that. He hands the check to Mel, and Mel looks at it and he says, Henri, I must tell you that this was probably the outstanding dinner of my life. The service was spectacular. The food was amazing. I attribute it all to you. My only problem is I don't tip as a matter of philosophy. And the guy's face just, I thought he was going to die. I mean, he just turned white. And then Mel waited about 2 seconds, and then he jumped up and he said, I'm just kidding, of course. And he hugged him. But that was Mel. There was always something like that.
Now, when he said that, what were you and Lydia thinking? I mean, was there a reaction? You were going, what did you think at the moment?
I thought he meant it.
And so
I knew it wasn't true.
Were you?
I thought, I was terribly embarrassed. I knew it wasn't true because I'd seen him pick up checks, but I thought, well, maybe he's just spent more than he wants to and doesn't want to tip this guy. Well, that was Mel. There was always something crazy.
Wow.
A surprise.
Do you still keep in touch with Mel at all?
Not as much as I'd like to. I mean, we, both of our wives died. I married again, and he moved on with his life. I see him, we're very friendly, but
he's still sharp as a tack. Unbelievable.
Oh, he always will be. Even when he's dead, he'll be sharp as a tack.
Him
He's
and
told me that.
Norman
He's
Lear.
assured me that even in death he will be sharp.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of your stuff takes place in a courtroom, not just across the table.
Yeah.
And you talk in your book about some tricks and how you got trapped in a court in a case, and you kind of learned from that, I think.
Well, I'm not sure which thing.
You know what? I'm trying to
mean.
think of which one it was either, but let's move on from that.
All right.
I know another investment that you made, or maybe you didn't invest your own money, but you took on these people as a client, was the world famous Smell-O-Vision.
Well, what happened was I represented his father, who was also a great impresario. And when Mike Jr., after his father's death, wanted to carry on an idea that his father had had. And the idea was Smell-O-Vision. And Smell-O-Vision was a process by which you'd see a scene, and if the scene had flowers in it, you'd smell the flowers because metal pipes would be laid on the floor of the theater from the front to the back. The pipes had holes in it, and they would spew. I hope I'm not catching.
I'm okay.
The smell of flowers would fill the theater, and that was Smell-O-Vision. There would be like 50 different smells. Fantastic. It sounded like the most bizarre idea in the world to me, but Mike Jr. was just obsessed with the idea. So the Carthay Circle Theater, which is no longer there, used to have the award ceremony used to be there. And Mike had the entire theater laid with these metal pipes. And he had a crazy professor who invented this machine, and it was up in the projection room. And theoretically, it would produce all of these smells. And the world's premiere was a huge thing, and a typical premiere. And everybody lined up, and the cars drove up and dropped off the stars. And we all went in and started out. The guy is having a shoe shine in Madrid. And he's up on a thing having a shoe shine. That works fine because big sound and shoe shine smell. Terrific. It really smelled like shoe shine. So, all right. Pretty good so far. He then buys a whole bunch of roses that he's going to take to his girlfriend. And he holds these roses up and smell the roses. But it kind of mixed with the smell of shoe shine. So people are saying, what is that? No, that's roses. No, it's kind of shoe shine. Well, by the time they got to the fifth smell, you couldn't tell what it was. Is that onions? No. That's I think that's engine oil. It was so. Smell-O-Vision, I think, only had one showing and disappeared. I remember when I think it was the LA Times that had a headline in that section of the paper that said, Smell-O-Vision lives up to its name.
Well, I don't know what year this was, but when I was starting out, I worked for William Castle.
Yep.
I don't remember the great Bill Castle, who had, he did a movie called The Tingler.
Oh, yeah.
And he went, yes, and they went into the movie theater and they electrified all of the seats. And when there was a cue, the projectionist would hit a button and everybody in their seats would jump. Nobody went back in. They never wanted to after that first performance. So that was another one of those bad ideas.
Yeah.
Although not to go away from what you said, but I love, there's a great Bill Castle story. He was a great showman.
Go away, it's fine.
Yeah, he made a movie called Macabre, and he said it was the scariest movie of all time. And he got Lloyd's of London to insure for $1 million if anybody died while watching the movie in the movie theater. Well, everybody brought their, 100-year-old grandparents in, hoping that somebody would die and they'd get the money. And so he made a lot of money. Nobody died.
Yeah.
But he made a lot of money on that movie. So maybe Mike he just had the wrong.
Yeah, right. The wrong pipes.
Now, as you know, as I told you before, Bert, this is going out to all the residents and everybody at the Motion Picture Home and everybody in the Motion Picture Fund. And I know you've had, quite as many people had, interesting work with Lou Wasserman, who was our patron for many years. And you tell a story in there about how you stood up to Lou with Peter Falk. Maybe you can.
No, that was a Jack Webb story. You're close.
Oh, I thought it was Peter Falk with
No,
Wasserman.
I did represent Peter, and excuse me, for years. That was Jack Webb. And I was very young. Really, I had just started representing Jack. I wasn't that much out of the service. And he had a fight with his agent, which was MCA at the time, before they took over Universal. And I was supposed to meet to see if we could work out a settlement with Lou Wasserman, who in those days was God. And I was just this kid. So I went to remember they had beautiful buildings in this Beverly Hills, right opposite the post office.
Yeah.
And I was shown into Mr. Wasserman's office, and wonderful antique furniture. The whole building had antiques. It was just beautiful. And all right, kid, he said, what do you got in mind? And I had a list, and I said, well, paragraph 1, I went through our points on the contract and why they were wrong. When I got to about the 5th point, and I started to read it, and he said, "You're asking for that, you little fucking bastard." He stood up to his full height. He said, "You get out of my office right now, and we're going to see you in court. And you can tell your client that if you ask for something like that, he goes to court, and we're going to see him there. And you're going to be very sorry." Kid, some kid comes in here he's just blown off. I'd never seen him like that. I'd never heard of anything like that. So I was shaking hands. I folded up my briefcase and left. And then I got a call that night.
Grab some water, please.
Oh, well, no, I'll be okay.
Okay.
That night I got a call from Al Dorskin, who was one of his main assistants. And Al said, "Look, if we can get you to sit down with Lou again, we can get him to sit down with you again. For Christ's sake, don't be so difficult about that." I said, "Well, there was nothing difficult about that point. It's just craziness." So he said, called later, and he said, "Yeah, he'll meet with you again tomorrow." So I went in tomorrow. And of course, when I got to point number 5, I was a little more cautious in the way I spoke about it. This, maybe we could have this, maybe we could solve this in another way. And anyway, we made the deal. And I had never seen nor heard of Lou Wasserman behaving that way. And I am convinced to this day that it was an act. That it was a great act. And I don't know whether he did that in other cases. I hadn't heard it. I suppose I would, but he pulled it off beautifully.
Well, maybe he's from the David Merrick school of.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Wow. Now I don't know if you remember this or even know this, but I was at one time in the 80s, I was president of Ray Stark's production company, Raystar. So I knew Ray's one attorney, Jerry Lipsky.
Jerry Lipsky, yeah.
And you mentioned a little problem Jimmy Kahn had, I think, with Ray.
Yeah.
Can you talk? Because Jerry was, as you know, very tough.
Yes.
But, as was Ray. But do you remember this story with Jimmy?
I remember this story, and ultimately, at the very end, I started representing Ray. But that was long after that.
That was long after I was gone, I can tell you.
Yeah. What happened was they made a picture. It was one of the two Fanny Rice pictures.
Funny Lady.
Funny Lady, yeah.
Right.
And Jimmy Kahn was to play the male star.
Right.
Who marries Fanny Rice. And Jerry and I worked out all the terms of the contract, and except for one major point. I don't even remember what the point was, but it was a critical point. And they kept saying, no, we're not going there. You got to realize we're not going to do it. And I said, you got to do it. He's not going to make the picture. So Jimmy went to rehearsals, and they ready to start shooting. And I called Jerry and I said, Jerry, you don't have a contract. And he said, well, are you talking about one provision? That's not, we'll work out that. I said, no, you're not working out anything, Jimmy. You're not going to be there tomorrow unless you agree to what he said. You don't have a contract. He said, well, we rehearsed and you can't do that. And that's contrary to the blah, blah, blah. Jerry Lipsky could be like that. We later became good friends. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but Jimmy Kahn is not going to be on the set tomorrow unless we reached an agreement. He doesn't have to work without a contract. He doesn't have a contract. You remember from law school, Jerry, if there's an open point you don't agree on, you don't have a contract. So that was that. He hung up, and a little bit later, he said, called up and said, okay, we'll do that provision your way. So he said, but my client is not happy about it. I said, I'm sure he's not happy about it. He shouldn't have pulled this shit. And they made the picture. And when the picture was all over, Jimmy Kahn got from Ray, beautiful Roman antique statuette. It was beautiful, must have been worth a fortune. And it was only about 10 inches, maybe a foot high. And it was a beautiful thing. And there was a card with it. And Jimmy said, you got to see the card. And the card said, thanks for everything, Jimmy. Please tell Mr. Fields to shove this up his ass.
Oh, wow.
So,
yeah.
That was Ray. Afterwards, Ray and I became not only friends, but I represented him after.
Even after that, huh?
Yeah. Well, it was maybe 5 years after that.
Uh-huh.
I represented him in a bunch of stuff.
Right.
I liked Ray very much.
Yeah, he had quite a temper, let's say.
Oh, yeah. Not like my other client, but he did have a temper.
Yes. And he liked to make sure that everybody knew it was Ray. Whatever was done, it was Ray that had done it. Nobody else got any credit.
Yes, I think you could say that.
Yeah. So now I know you went up against the Writers Guild with Gore Vidal.
Yep.
That's an interesting story.
Well, that's one that it's kind of got a twist to it that I like. I can't even remember the name of the picture.
It wasn't Superman.
No, it wasn't Superman. The picture took place in Italy. And there was a big fight about credit, and he wasn't getting, Gore had written the bulk of it, he felt, and he wasn't going to get credit. And I claimed that the entire guild arbitration system was illegal as it then existed. And they had ruled against him. So we went to Superior Court here, and a very courageous judge said, this argument makes sense to me. I don't think as a matter of corporate law, this is a legal provision. And they went up on appeal, and the Court of Appeal upheld it. So here was the guild, and the guild was going nuts because here was a holding in court that their entire system of arbitration was invalid because you didn't know who the arbitrator was. And I argued that the arbitrator could be your opponent's cousin. That just can't work. You have to know who your judge is. So great win. So I call up Gore, who was in Italy, lived in Italy most of the time. And I said, great news, Gore, great news. The court has ruled and it's been upheld that the entire guild credit arbitration mechanism is invalid. And therefore, you're going to have your name on that film because they can't rely on, I think there's been an arbitration. He said, there was a long silence. And he said, well, Bert, I'll tell you, I saw the picture last night. Get my name off that piece of shit.
You worked so hard to get his name on.
Get it on, even to the Supreme Court of California, to get his name on that piece of shit. And
well, so now I want to ask a question. I don't know if you know, but I'm been very involved for many years on the Producers Guild and the Producers Guild mark and the arbitration. And our arbitrators have to be, A, they have to be anonymous, and B, we give a list of arbitrators, like 75 or 100 to the producers, and you either have to recuse yourself as an arbitrator if you're somebody's brother-in-law or you're a buddy or whatever, but we never give, that would kill everything if we ever let the name of the arbitrators known to everybody. It would kind of destroy us. So
of course,
I don't understand how you got people to actually say I was an arbitrator, because we make sure that these are very reputable, very high-end producers that do the arbitrations.
well, there were technical problems they had with the way they had set it up, and my recollection is it had not been passed by the board in a proper way. So it was almost a corporate problem. They were able to amend later and make it work. But whatever the problem was, and I don't really remember, I found some technical problem that turned out would not apply to the Directors Guild, who I represented for a while, and even tried to enforce that for me.
Right. But the Writers Guild now is anonymous also, I think.
Oh, yeah, they do the same thing.
Yeah.
But they've done it properly now. They have the right kind of, I think they had their members actually vote on it.
Right. So now let's move on.
Sure.
Not a nice time for you, but I was fortunate enough to work several times with Warren Beatty and worked with Dustin. And you tell her, they're both pretty narcissistic guys. They're very talented, but they think of themselves generally first. And that's probably Warren calling, saying, "Don't answer."
Don't. I'm not answering it.
But you tell a story about how thoughtful they were when Lydia got sick, and I thought this was a very heartwarming story. If you feel like
well, most people don't know it, but Warren is an amateur doctor.
Yeah, so I know.
And he really knows more than most doctors, I think, about some things, or at least he thinks he does. And Lydia had been diagnosed with cancer, and at that point, it was in her lung. And Warren called and said, "Have you checked on her brain?" And I said, "Well, why would I check on her brain? I've got an oncologist, a specialist, and they say the problem's in lung. The X-ray show it's the lung. Why?" And he said, well, records tell us that a lesion in the brain is often connected to a lesion in the lung, and it can be deadly, and you should check it out. I said, come on, Warren. I mean, okay, I'll raise it with my doctor. And I actually raised it with the oncologist. He said, don't worry about it, Mr. Fields. So Lee and I went to New York on some business that I had. And as we got into the lobby of the hotel, the clerk said, Mr. Fields, what is it? I said, well, Mr. Beatty has been calling. I said, oh, well, I'll call him back. I went up to the room and get another call. Mr. Fields, Mr. Beatty is in the lobby. He's in the lobby. He's in California. No, he's here in the lobby. He's looking at me. Put him on. I talked to him, Warren, what is it? He said, Lydia must go to an oncologist that I have fixed who knows about this kind of thing, specializes in it. I've got a car waiting right now, and you've got the appointment with the doctor. So come on downstairs, bring Lydia, and we're going to go to the doctor together. I said, you flew in to do that? He said, yeah, of course. How else would I do it? We did. We went to the doctor. Sure as hell, she had a brain tumor as well. It would have killed her in a very, very short time. She died anyway, but much later. And I mean, it was just remarkable. And from that time on, Warren and also Dustin really wouldn't leave us alone. I mean, they couldn't, when Lydia was in the hospital, they would flood her with gifts and flowers, take turns visiting all the time. And then finally, after she died, they had me back, or maybe I was on business in New York, but they insisted that I come to the cutting rooms of the pictures they were making. It didn't turn out to be a successful picture, but it was, but they were cutting it. And in those days, you cut in a different way. You didn't just turn a knob, you cut. And so they would give me a moviola and I would be looking at it and they'd say, what do you think of this scene? What do you think of that? And they didn't give a damn what I thought, but they were just trying to make me feel comfortable in these weeks after Lydia died. And they wouldn't leave me alone. I was in that cutting room and other parts of the picture process almost every day. And believe me, they were not paying any attention to my artistic views, but they just wouldn't leave me
I
alone.
wanted to make sure and take care
I
of it.
wanted to make sure I was okay. And they were incredible. And I couldn't have a meal alone. I couldn't, just with me all the time.
And the good news is you met Barbara Guggenheim a few years later and you and Barbara have been together forever now.
Yep, more than 30 years. So that's true. That was the good news. But people talk about actors being selfish and maybe they are, but boy, they were certainly wonderful to me. And it went on over a long period of time before they finally, I don't know, I guess before Barbara, really.
Great story. Well, I emailed Warren that you were going to be on today. I have no idea if he's listening, but
yeah,
if he's
well,
there.
Warren has helped a lot of people.
Oh.
He doesn't let anybody know about it.
Oh, I know. He helped. I asked him to help a friend of mine who saved his life because of it. Yeah. So now 82 million people last November did something that you did a few years before that. And that was to fire Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you fired Donald Trump?
Well, Donald, I won't go into detail about why I fired him, except he did something that was, in my view, crooked. Is that you or me?
No, I think that's you, but it's okay. Keep going.
Okay. He did something that I thought.
Something that might have been criminal, Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Oh my God, crooked. I'm so surprised.
Yeah. So it was involved with the what's the name of the group that he bought?
This Universe?
Yeah,
Miss-
no, I confuse all the Miss, was
I
it Miss
think it's
Universe
Universe.
or Miss something? He bought the whole thing. But I had a client, who very, very wealthy man, who wanted to buy it as well. I guess it was Miss Universe. And both my clients, and I was representing Donald in a real estate transaction. And I got the two of them together. We had a breakfast, and I said, why don't you two guys buy this together? Why compete with each other? Drive the price up. One of you is going to lose. One of you, you don't care if you own half Miss Universe and half. And my other client said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And Donald said, great idea. And then toward the end of the breakfast, Donald said, well, I may not do it. Get involved in this thing at all. I've got so many things going and buildings I have to worry about. Do I want to get into this universe or whatever it was thing? He said, maybe not. I'm not sure, but look, I will help you. He said to my other client, because I have a good feeling for what price it's going to take with an auction to win this. But it was one of those auctions where you submitted your bid and you didn't know what the other guys were bidding. That's strange.
I'm
Probably
not-
for somebody who's watching.
Keep going.
In any event, so we parted, and a little while later, he called the client suggesting what he thought might be a good offer to make, what he thought would take it. And he said he had decided he wasn't going to do it himself. So my client submitted, and I'll make up a number, like $40 million. I'm making that up. I'd have no idea what it was. And okay, we waited and waited to hear, and we then hear one person outbid him. What do you mean outbid him? How much they bid? Well, they bid 40,500,000, just enough to be top his bid. Well, who was it? Donald Trump.
Whoa. Sounds like
So
him.
I wrote a letter to Donald. It's in my book. I said, you may think this is fine. I don't. And I will no longer represent you.
Mm.
And we went through a whole thing about that. And he then was going to write a book saying he had fired me. Fortunately, I had written the letter that said, I'm firing you. So the publisher said, we got to take it out of the book. And that was about the end of it. I'm sure I was not the only one that he did something like that.
Oh, I'm sure not. So
He did show me around his apartment with the gold toilets and all that.
listen, you may not know this, but I was lucky enough. Well, I made a movie called Heaven Could Wait with Warren, and I got to Deacon Jones and all these great football players. And then years later, I made another film, and Jerry Rice was there. So I got to throw a football and have Jerry Rice, the greatest of all time, catch it. But that's nothing compared to you boxed Oscar De La Hoya for 3 rounds. Now,
But
did you knock him out?
Oscar wasn't trying very hard.
Did he hit you at all? And you stood up?
I don't recall being hit. And I would like to attribute that to my skill from when I boxed in high school. But no, mostly he laughed. I have a picture of it in the book. And he's pretty much laughing through the whole. We went 3 rounds. And he, by the way, he did teach me in 1 minute what I was doing wrong. Because I could throw a left, I couldn't throw my right. And it was a terrible disadvantage. That's why I lost a lot of fights. But he said, you just got to turn your right hip slightly inward when you throw it. And it made all the difference in the world. So I'm ready to go now. I will go fight any 92-year-old guy.
Anybody out there is looking for a sparring match, Bert's ready.
If they're over 90.
Okay. All right. Now, as I'm sure you know, after Lou Wasserman passed, the mantle of running our ship at the Motion Picture Home and Television Fund went to Jeffrey Katzenberg. And Jeffrey has been fundraising for us and kind of keeping our ship afloat for many years. I don't know if you can talk about it, but the trial with Eisner and Jeffrey was it's very detailed in your book, and I hope that some of you out there get a chance to read it. By the way, Bert, I don't know if we can ask this, but I'd love to be able to get a couple of copies for the Motion Picture Home so people in the residency can get a chance to read it. I think they really enjoy it.
It's a great idea. I love it. I am a great believer in the home, and it helped Jeffrey from time to time with some of the problems. And I'd love to send, I'll send a whole bunch of them.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Has the practice of entertainment law changed since you started?
Oh, I think it's changed in the sense that the media has changed. I mean, nobody ever thought about the idea that you would have things on television that people would be subscribing to see movies on television. Why do that when you can go to a theater? You know, I mean, that's what we would have said in those days.
Yeah.
You know, we had no idea, and everything has changed dramatically. I mean, there used to be record stores where you went in and you bought a record, and all that is gone.
But from a law perspective, other than, you know, paragraph 12, which says in streaming and blah 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 blah, has the actual law of making these contracts between studios or independents and writers, directors, actors, agencies, has that changed at all?
Yes, the fundamental principles haven't changed. I mean, a contract is still a contract, but the issues are very, very different. I mean, who is going to get the money from when you turn on your television and a wonderful movie comes on that ordinarily you'd pay a lot of money at the box office? Now, who gets that money? You don't. So there are going to be lots of fights about things like that. Almost every point, and as I said, the music business is totally different. You know, the record stores are gone.
Right.
People look at me when I have a record, they say, "What's that?" You know, the round black thing. It is very different. The issues are different. They're related, but they're different. And people will deal with them. We have, in some ways, a lot more qualified lawyers who are working in the field. When I started, there were very, very few lawyers who practiced as Loeb and Loeb did a great deal of work, and they represented MGM. And the rest of us represented some movie stars and some directors, some producers. Now it's such a burgeoning industry in so many ways that there's room for more, and more of the lawyers are better educated. You know, you got guys that, and there are lots more law schools that are qualified.
Mm-hmm.
We used to, in my day, there were people practicing law who didn't go to law school. They clerked for a lawyer.
Wow.
And you could get a certificate, be admitted to the bar if you passed the test, just on the basis of growing up in a lawyer's office.
Well, so let me ask you,
Yes,
I don't know if I told you before, but my youngest son, Robbie, whose birthday is tomorrow. Happy birthday, Robbie, if you're listening.
Happy birthday, Robbie.
He's a partner at Hanson Jacobson.
Oh, very fine firm.
Yeah, great firm. And I wanted to ask you what advice you'd give a young person who's thinking of going into entertainment law. What would you, what advice? I'm sure you mentor. I know you teach at Stanford.
Yeah.
Is there something that you might say that there's this kind of encapsulated thing? Why go into entertainment law?
Well, I'll tell you what I tell my students in the entertainment class at Stanford. It is the hardest thing in the world to get into. That is, for a lawyer to get into the practice of entertainment law. The large firms have an entertainment department, but the kids are beating down the door to get in that department. It's great fun. You know, if you're a kid coming out of law school, do you want to do an actress's contract, or do you want to do a real estate mortgage? Well, you want to do the actress's contract. If you're a guy, you certainly want to do the actress's contract. And so when I started out, there were very few people who were doing it. Louis Swartz, who really founded the first firm I went with, was the first motion picture lawyer, and I can't tell you what year it was, but I know that he was in the Harvard class of '01. So that tells you how old he was. And he came out here, I think Paramount brought him out to be the first motion picture lawyer. And there were very few. As I said, Logan Lowe did a lot of that. There were into the Martin Gang did some, and David Tanema, but there were a few. If O'Melveny had a motion picture department, and they did, it was one or two guys. But that firm, they probably only had 30 lawyers. Now there are hundreds and hundreds of lawyers. So it's grown and it's gotten better as law firms have spread and gotten better. I mean, law schools have spread and gotten better. It's a more educated group, more qualified today than I think ever before.
But if they don't have, you know, a lot of people, if they don't have an in to get into one of these places because they know somebody,
well,
how does a young lawyer get into entertainment law?
There are 2 or 3 ways to do it. I told the class at Stanford, one way is at a studio. Go out to a studio and apply. Tell them I went to Harvard Law School, I just graduated, I want to get into this. There are openings in the studio. They have 2 divisions really that do law stuff, as
Right.
you know, of course.
Right.
One are the people who really make the contracts, negotiate them, and 2 are the people that take out those printed forms and do that. And that's called the legal department, the second, and the first is business affairs. So there are 2 areas you can get into if you can get that job with the studio. They don't hire often, but it's a possibility. The other possibility is a law firm. There are 2 kinds of law firms. Law firms like Hanson Jacobson essentially do nothing but motion picture, not motion picture, television,
Entertainment law, yeah.
Right. And then there are the big firms that do some of that, but a lot of other things, bankruptcy and real estate. So the problem is generally, and I think your kid is an exception to this, generally those boutique firms, the smaller firms that do nothing but entertainment, don't hire people just coming out of law school. They're looking for somebody who's been with a bigger firm for a time in their department, and now he's already trained. They don't want to have to train people. And that's one way to go, but they don't hire very often. And when they do, they're typically hiring somebody from another firm. Then there are the big firms. The big firms have an entertainment department, but typically they would have, for everybody in the entertainment department, there'd be 5 kids who want to be in the entertainment department and would like to transfer from the mortgage department. I mean, everybody wants to be in there, not everybody, but most young kids would love the idea of doing that stuff. So you either go to a big firm, sometimes you'll have to take a job in the real estate department or no particular department and hope that you can get into entertainment, or try a studio. You might get lucky that they're looking for somebody at that time and they'll hire, but it's tough. It is really tough. Generally, you're going to have to, and this is what I say to my client, you're going to have to probably go with a firm in some other department or just generally as a young associate and try to impress them with your talent and get into the motion picture department that way, sideways, because it's hard.
Right. So let me ask you, I asked this of an old friend of mine who does criminal law, but This will be my last question because then.
Hey, Margot, it's Amy.
Sorry about that,
Turn it
guys.
off, whoever that is.
Yep, they're off. No problems. Sorry about that.
In criminal law, I always asked an old friend of mine, you know they're guilty, but you were able to get them off.
Yeah.
Is there a case, you don't have to tell us which one, but where you, with your talent, you knew the other people were right. They were right, but you knew you could get your client off or get your client in the way. And was there ever a time that after it was all over and your client won and you knew the other side was in the right, did you ever feel that remorse of, boy, I don't know if I can do that anymore because I really hurt these other people where they were in the right?
Yes and no. Certainly, I have been involved in cases that could have gone either way. Most of the cases I've tried could have gone either way because sophisticated people don't bring a case to trial with all that expense unless they think they've got a shot at winning. So there's certainly been a lot of cases where I felt I could have lost that I won. But the law isn't usually that clear cut and simple. So I can't remember a case where I said, I have no right to be here at all. I'm just dead wrong and I had to go away. No, there's always been something, because I wouldn't tell a client, let's go to court if we don't really have a good argument. If I can find an argument, which is my job, I may come up with some new argument that nobody thought of, but if I know my client's in the wrong, I'm going to tell him, settle the goddamn case. Don't, you're going to spend a fortune and much more, and you're probably going to lose.
Got it. Good answer. So I'm going to bring back Jen Clymer.
Okay.
We've only got a couple of minutes, and I think Jen has a question or two. There she
Good.
is.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being with us and sharing these great stories with the residents. We have been asking people since almost a year. It will be a year that we've been doing, hold on, everyone's far enough away, right? We will have been doing this show for a year on St. Patrick's Day.
Ah,
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. But one of the things we've been doing is asking people what their favorite movies are and what their favorite TV shows are and making
okay.
our pandemic must-watch list.
Well, movies. Boy, that's a tough question. And I thought about it in the past. Well, Godfather would be, if not the top, near the top.
Yep.
The original
Yeah.
Godfather. Casablanca is a personal favorite of mine. I'd have to think more about that. And it's television. I'm not a television series watcher.
I think I'd say for Bert, it's Dragnet.
Yeah, I was going to say Dragnet.
Because he
no,
was in it.
actually, I think another client, Peter Falk in Columbo, I really liked Columbo a lot. If I really had to pick my favorite thing that was on television, it would be the Army McCarthy hearings way back when.
We've never had anyone say the Army McCarthy hearings.
Well, you never had anybody that old on your show before.
Oh, we had Larry Terman. Larry Terman's 94.
Really? I was in grammar school with Larry. I was 92, so either he was dumb or I was smart. No, he was probably a couple of grades ahead of me.
Yeah.
I remember him, and he was a great athlete in grammar school.
Really? Well, he's out at the motion picture home now. He just moved in.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, he wanted to, it was his own choice, and he moved from Century City to
Yeah.
home and is having a great time out there.
That's wonderful. I like Larry very much. I haven't seen him in a long time. Both
have
of
to
you
tell you,
feel
This was, for me, I loved every minute of this. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so honored that you did this. Your stories are great. Your humor is fantastic. I know that everybody at the home and on Facebook or whatever, I'm sure have had an amazing time. So thank you so much. Bob Beecher, I see that you're back on. Is there something you wanted to say, Bob?
I'm going to invite Bob to turn his camera on if he's there.
And you're on mute, Bob, so unmute yourself.
I will say, normally at noon, Bert, so you know, part of the live broadcast that we are doing,
Yeah.
we're keeping everyone on campus really well informed. Bob is with us every day at noon to give updates on what's going on with our isolation unit, if there have been any staff members that have had COVID, what the new protocols are, because, you know, we're dealing with shifting sands and new rules and things fluctuated. So Bob has been available to the residents every day that we're doing this live show to answer their questions, allay any kind of fears, address problems that he might not have been aware of. And some of those phone calls that you were hearing toward the end of your interview was people calling to say, "Where's Bob? What our update? Where's our noon update?" So the update will happen very shortly, but it was just incredible to have you on the show. Thank you, Bert. And I'm going
to. Sorry about my voice, but it's
Bert. It was a real honor. And we're just so thrilled to have you. And Bert, my contract for this show is up. It's coming up, and I'm wondering.
By the way, before you say another word, there's one of those openings over my door in my office. Just throw the money over the transom before we talk anymore.
Okay.
And Freda wanted to say something. Freda, did you want to say something?
I just want to say thank you for being our Hawk's 15th guest.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow.
It's very exciting. A year of wonderful.
I don't have a contract, Bert. I have no contract. I just they asked, and I'm here to do it for them. That's all.
Well, having no contract is your advantage.
Well,
you sue them for all they're worth.
I love giving back to the home. Honestly,
I know
why I do it.
a lot about it because of Jeffrey, of course.
Yeah.
And I'm a great believer in the home. And I keep asking myself, I've been a vice president of this company and that company. Am I qualified to get into the home?
You are, Bert.
You're qualified, Bert.
Yep.
Bob will take care of it. Anything you want.
Well, who's going to tell my wife?
Barbara can come.
Okay.
Yeah. You're invited.
Bert, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Such a pleasure.